Oh,
Here we go. Woo! Woo!
good morning. Good morning, Timothy. Good morning, everybody watching us or listening to us in Clubhouse, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. It's a pleasure to have you with us this on this Sunday morning. It is the first day of September, and well, this is our 186th episode of Japanese Politics One-on-One. Thank you, Timothy, for tuning in once again. I can see that you have a nice cup of something, your favorite morning drink, I believe. Well, I hope that all is good on your side. I can see that beautiful view of the yachts behind. Very, very nice. And I certainly hope that it doesn't stop. It doesn't start raining, actually. But before I actually do a plug for our sponsors, say a thank you word for them. Let's dive in and see what we're going to talk about today.
Okay, thank you very much, Maya. Let me give you a brief analysis of what is going on and then what we will talk about in more detail later. Today is the 1st of September. We finished August. Isn't that great? I am reporting from Yumenoshima Marina. You can see maybe the Tokyo skyline in the back. This is a massive marina that's just downtown. Since the typhoon is approaching, I am here trying to secure my and several other people's boats so that they don't suffer damage from a potential storm surge. And it's actually very quiet today. It's not raining. It's supposed to be raining very hard here, probably at around 11 o'clock. So we'll wrap it up at around 10 o'clock as usual. The yen closed out, Maya, on Friday at $146.2 to the yen. That's just a slight bit higher than it ended last week. So there does seem to be some stability in the forex market, which is good news. The LDP election starts in 11 days, and that's probably the beef of what I'm going to be talking about today and opening for questions and comments. It's the biggest thing that's going on right now, a dynamic, massive potential change to LDP politics is approaching us. The Constitutional Democratic Party, not to be outdone by the LDP, which the LDP is striving hard to do, has their election as well. There are now maybe 5 candidates to run for the leadership of that party. The current president or the current leader of the Constitutional Democratic Party, Mr. Izumi, is being confronted not only by the fellow that he replaced and the leader, the founder of the party after the Democratic Party, it turned into the Constitutional Democratic Party, but also the fellow who was formerly the prime minister when they kicked the LDP out of power. He is also running together with a smattering of others. So it's a very interesting race. I'd like to get into that a little bit more. Hyogo governor is Mr. Motohiko Saito is under the gun. This has been going on for a couple of weeks now. I've not really spent much time talking about it. It is something of a scandal, power harassment of his colleagues, the bureaucrats within the Hyogo Prefecture. You'll remember Hyogo Prefecture because it is the second prefecture where Ishin actually could say, we have a candidate, we're starting to grow. We've captured all of Osaka, or the city government, the prefectural government. We've essentially kicked the LDP out of Osaka, and now the next contiguous prefecture, Hyogo, we now have a governor there. We did it. We elected him with the support of the LDP. So we're on a roll. This was 3 years ago, and now he is under fire. There are 2 bureaucrats that have committed suicide recently as kind of an allegation towards his power harassment. So he's under the gun there. He's going to go under a potential no confidence motion this next week. It's a big deal for Ishin because they're up again and they're down again. And with the Constitutional Democratic Party coming on so strong in this next series of elections in this month, Ishin is kind of on their back foot a little bit. The August deadline for the ministries to submit their budgets has passed. We reported last week on the tremendous budget submitted by the Ministry of Defense. All of the ministries had to do that at the end of the month, and now it's being announced, it's being released. The Health Ministry announced theirs with about maybe a 1.4% increase from last year. So this will be submitted and then chewed up by the bureaucrats and passed in April, as is customary. So between now and these 6 months or 7 months in front of us, there's going to be a lot of haggling within the bureaucracy on how much money that they really need. And the budget requests, sometimes they're denied as much as they want, and sometimes it's actually supplemented. Let me see. There was a Chinese military plane. I don't know if you caught this. A Chinese military reconnaissance plane, which invaded or violated Japanese airspace for about 2 minutes this week. I think it was on Tuesday. A very big deal. This is unlike the Chinese to do that. They've invaded or violated Japanese airspace. They were scrambled. They were pursued. They loitered around there for another 10 or 15 minutes. But this happened in a delicate area, the Danjo Islands that are part of Nagasaki. And it happened at a time when not only Jake Sullivan is there speaking with Foreign Minister Yang, but also a delegation from Japan is also in China talking about U.S.-Japan relations, U.S.-China relations, and Japan-China relations. So a lot going on this week, also involving the Prime Minister's schedule as well. And then finally, just on touching things up, this is not news to anybody, but Typhoon 10 is punishing Kumamoto and the southern prefectures of Japan. It is inching its way up the archipelago. It is going to brush by Tokyo probably tonight, tomorrow, but it is doing tremendous damage, particularly with regard to flooding and landslides. But the winds are not that tremendous. But here in the marina, everybody has already doubled down, tied down their boats, and prepared for the worst. But I don't think the worst is going to hit us. That's it for the top news. Maya, I'm going to get into more of the details after a word from our sponsor.
Thank you so very much, Timothy, for that. And I would like to say thank you to Kanchu.com, a company that offers bilingual services to individuals who want to buy and sell real estate in Tokyo and Yokohama. The company also does property management and investment property. And I know that some foreigners still believe that it is difficult to rent or buy a property here in Japan because of being a foreigner. And it used to be the case. But today we have Kanchu.com in, just here out of Tokyo. They're based in Yokohama, and James Howell at james@kanchu.com. So do not hesitate to contact James, connect with him on LinkedIn so that you can talk and receive a customized treatment and a customized meeting of your services. So Timothy, let's go back and let's go into the details. I know that there is a lot to talk about because a lot is happening today.
Thank you very much, Maya. Prime Minister Kishida is not resting. He has decided that he's not going to run in the presidential election, which will be, it starts in 10 days, in 11 days actually, and it will culminate on the last Friday of this month on September 27th, a long 15-day campaign, and it looks like there might be, I don't know, 7, 8, maybe 9 more candidates. I think the field is becoming a little bit more stable. There are a lot of people that want to throw their hats into the ring, but you're required to bring 20 endorsements in order to be considered as a candidate. And those 20 endorsements are not just for the LDP presidency. The Constitutional Democratic Party is also going through this race, and each of the candidates also needs 20 endorsements for them to qualify as a candidate. Komeito is also going through a leadership race. Mr. Yamaguchi decided just this last week that, in fact, he was not going to run to replace himself. 15 years in the same position. The Constitutional Democratic Party, the Komeito, has never had a contested election. It's usually by acclamation. Everybody decides this is the guy we want to be our leader, and there's not much of a race. But Komeito is going through the same process. They will have their leadership race at the same time that they're having their convention. I think their convention starts. Let me see. Well, it maybe around the time that the Liberal Democratic Party starts their 15-day campaign and ends a day after the LDP race. So they will have their own brand new leader, potentially. I don't think Mr. Yamaguchi will stand for election. Komeito will have their new leader, and the LDP will have their new leader, and they have kindly and politely extended invitation to the new leader of the LDP, whoever that's going to be. But the prime minister has been really busy. Nevertheless, he's not running, so he's not looking for people to endorse him. He is being asked if people can kiss his ring. I mean, people are coming up and saying, Your Excellency, Mr. Prime Minister, I've enjoyed working with you, and I'm going to run as a candidate. So he's got two people in his faction. His faction still exists on paper, even though it's announced it would be disbanding. It was the first one to announce that it would disband. There are two candidates from his faction, Mr. Hayashi, who is the chief spokesman for the prime minister, and Ms. Kamikawa, who is the foreign minister. Potentially, I think, throwing their hats in. They've both announced that they would make a claim. They were supposed to actually do it on Friday, but because of the typhoon and probably the newsworthiness compared to the weather, they decided to step back a little bit. Let me see what else is going on with the prime minister. He has a team visiting China this week over 3 days, led by Mr. Nikai. You'll remember Mr. Nikai because he was the leader and the former Secretary General under Mr. Abe for a long time. Mr. Abe was the longest serving prime minister. Mr. Nikai was the longest serving Secretary General as a consequence, and Mr. Kishida was the longest serving foreign minister. So Mr. Nikai has decided he's not going to run an election again. When the election comes up in September or October of this next year, he won't be a candidate, but his faction will be turned over to his second eldest son. And he is in China for 3 days talking about trade, investment, trying to fix this terrible boycott of China for food and fruit and seafood from Japan as a consequence of Japan poisoning the water by dumping the treated water into the Pacific Ocean. That's a big deal that he's trying to manage. They arrived on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they were in China. On Tuesday, there was the violation of Japan airspace by the China reconnaissance plane. So that really kind of colored the conversations there. At the same time, Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, was also in China for 3 days, speaking at a very high level, as you would expect. The first time in since 2016 that a National Security Advisor has visited China. This is really newsworthy. All of this action going on, a lot of action, a lot of attention being spent there. It's almost as if people are hypersensitive of something getting ready to break. There's just so much activity there, and it's not just on the diplomatic end. It's also, military spending and the bolstering of forces by the United States and by several of Japan's allies in protecting Japan for potential kinetic action. Also, there was a delegation from the House of Representatives Select Committee on Strategic Competition between the United States and the Communist Party of the Chinese Communist Party. This was led by their chairman, John Mullin. Mulan. He's a Republican from Michigan, but he was here with a very powerful delegation, spending time with the prime minister, talking about uh, China's competition policy and what Japan is going to be doing, what the United States is going to be doing in relation to that. And then finally, as if there wasn't enough, Senator William Hagerty, you'll remember him because he was the ambassador to Japan before Caroline Kennedy. So he was ambassador to Japan appointed by Donald Trump. He had an abbreviated term, maybe 2 years, and then he left Japan. He ran for the Senate. He won the Senate seat. So he's a senator from the United States. He was here with a delegation of senators to talk about U.S. Japan trade, investment, and that sort of thing. It's a big deal when a delegation of senators visits Japan, and being led by Senator Hagerty, you've got to imagine there was a lot going on there, occupying the prime minister. Foreign Minister Kamikawa is also calling on Iran to de-escalate with what's going on between Israel and Iran and Hezbollah, that sort of thing. And the Japanese government, the prime minister signed off on designating formally 3 more airports and 9 ports as facilities to use by the self-defense forces. We've talked about this before, but it bears reminding, but also it is an increase, almost 50% increase in the ports and airports that are now designated for use by the self-defense forces, and by extension, the United States military and Air Force in the case of an emergency or for contingency planning. So these, the total is now 28. So this means, and for those of you who have traveled internationally, sometimes you fly into an airport, and part of the airport is designated for military jets and that sort of thing. So flying into some airports, like in Korea, some airports in the United States, you see these fighter jets that are also on the tarmac. You've never seen that in Japan, and that's going to be more and more prominent, and not just in the airports, but in the ports as well. And there's been already an agreement between the United States and Japan where Japanese companies can maintain and supply and fix American military planes and ships and for resupply. This is really a bleeding of the 2 militaries together, and it's going at a pretty big pace. And as we announced last week, the budget for the Defense Department in Japan has also increased. The largest military budget in Japan's post-war history, only eclipsed in second place by the budget last year. So as you know, Japan has committed to spending 2% of its GDP over the next, it was a 5-year plan. We are now in year 3, and year 3 is far more expansive than year 2 was. So year 4 is probably going to be much of the same. But there's a lot of developments, and as you know, if you're following this program, every week there's a development. So I appreciate you tuning in, but give it 6 months, and who knows how things are going to be developing. And finally, with regard to the prime minister approved a new policy for a directorship for disaster prevention and response. This was pretty much, I don't know. I mean, you would think that Japan already has such a directorship tying the entire government together. When you see the movie about the 3/11 disaster, the triple disaster in Japan, and how they banded together in the prime minister's office to guide that, and what a mess that was. The United States has actually insisted that Japan get their act together and pull something like this together. We reported just very briefly on this about 2 weeks ago, and they've come to town and done that with the allocation of about 1,000 other bureaucrats who have been identified to supplement this directorship. That's a pretty big deal. And with the disaster response and the number of disasters that frequently come to Japan, you would have thought that they already have this down pat. But even in the Noto Peninsula, where the earthquake was more than a year ago, there's still a lot of facilities and services that are not reaching the people. But let's get back to the LDP. That's the prime minister. He is not as engaged, even though it's his position that people are vying for. The campaign starts in 11 days for a 15-day campaign, as you know, ending on the last Friday of this month. There are 3 people who have formally announced. I had anticipated maybe 7 by today, by the time that we were going to be talking about it today. But maybe 4 of them demurred and decided that as a consequence of the typhoon, they wouldn't announce. And those 4 are, let me see, Sanai Takaichi, Mr. Motegi, Mr. Koizumi, and Mr. Hayashi. So the ones that have announced are Kobayashi Taku. He was the first out of the box about 2 Mondays ago. The following Friday, Konotaro announced, no, he announced on Monday, and Shigeru Ishiba announced his platform and announced that he was going to be running. So the hierarchy was, it was Kobayashi coming out strong out of the box, then Mr. Ishiba, and then Konotaro. Konotaro is interesting for a lot of reasons, and I know a lot of people in our audience like him. He's very affable. He speaks English excellently. Went to Georgetown. I've known him for 30 plus years. Personally, he's a politician of the highest class. His father was Speaker of the House, the only politician to be elected president. That we're going through this presidential race. His father was the only person to be elected president of the LDP, but not prime minister. As a consequence of that, he became Speaker of the House, but still very powerful, led a delegation to China about 3 weeks ago. But with the unannounced yet, Ms. Takaichi has said that she will announce on the 9th, which is in 8 days. So that'll be maybe Monday of next week. Mr. Motegi, the Secretary General, says he will announce on the 4th. Looks like that's Wednesday or Thursday. Mr. Koizumi, everybody is waiting. Lots of anticipation there. He's got movie star quality. He will announce on the 6th. And Mr. Hayashi, the Chief Cabinet Secretary, said that he will announce on the 3rd, which is Tuesday. There are another 5 who said they're going to announce. I'm issuing my book. I've written a new book. I'm issuing my manifesto. But they're still struggling to get this darn 20 endorsements. And it does, for people in the LDP to have difficulty there, and with so many candidates, you can imagine that is a bit of a trouble. But they have 366 members. When you consider the Constitutional Democratic Party, which is much smaller, to get 20 members to endorse you, and there are right now 5 potential candidates, it's a real difficult thing to do. So Mr. Kato Katsunobu is having a little bit of difficulty getting his 20. He said he's still considering the race. Ms. Kamakawi, who is the foreign minister, just speaking with Iran over the phone, as I mentioned on Friday, she admitted that she was having difficulty getting the 20 endorsements. I can appreciate her situation. This would be her first time running. She is popular. She's a woman. She has great respectability. I would like to see her run, but if she doesn't have the 20 endorsements, that's a foregone conclusion. Mr. Aoyama from the upper house has decided that he's going to run. He's still considering whether he's going to have the 20 endorsements or not. I think it's probably easier for him to get the 20, even though he is not as well known as Kamikawa or Mr. Kato. We've got Saito Ken, who is also going to run. He's still considering his options. And Noda Seiko, who is also admitted a bit of difficulty. And I think among the women who are running, probably, I mean, she is so accomplished as a politician, very well liked. But getting those endorsements when everybody else is competing, you want to choose the winner. You want to be on the winner's side. So she might, in the end, not throw her hat in. But I think right now we at least have 7 who are pretty secure for throwing their hat into the ring. And we can get into the details of that a little bit later. But I want to get into the Constitutional Democratic Party. They have decided that they're going to have their election on the 23rd. The LDP announces on the 27th. This is 4 days before the LDP. They did the same thing last time, and it caused a lot of controversy because the Constitutional Democratic Party was overshadowed by the LDP election. I think the Constitutional Democratic Party is going to have a lot of heat and light this time because it is really turning out to be a bit of a, not quite a fist fight, but from the sidelines, it looks very, very interesting. Let me describe to you why. Kenta Izumi is the leader. He took over about 4 years ago from Mr. Edano, who was the leader of the party after the party lost its power under Mr. Noda. So it went from Mr. Edano to Mr. Izumi. Mr. Izumi is supported by Mr. Edano to be the leader. Mr. Edano helped start the Constitutional Democratic Party. So he's very popular, and he's decided that he's going to throw his hat into the ring too. And if you're the younger Mr. Izumi, you've got to think, gosh, boss, thanks a lot. You know, I thought I was doing a pretty good job. But I think that the temperament within the Constitutional Democratic Party is that there is going to be elections sooner rather than later. And we need to take the reins of the party, and we need to build a strategy for how we're going to be, able to either topple the LDP or coalesce with it. So there are two thoughts here. And Mr. Edano and Mr. Izumi have been more in the camp of, let's see if we can accommodate them, something like maybe a coalition partner, or potentially if the LDP loses terribly, as we suspect in the next election, they're going to be looking around for somebody else to help them so that they have that majority of votes, and then they can sway policy and committee seats. So Mr. Edano is running. Mr. Izumi is having a little bit of trouble getting the 20 endorsements. But it's not just him, because it's not just Mr. Edano who is running for election, but it's also Mr. Noda. And Mr. Noda is the prime minister. He was the prime minister that kicked out Asotaro and became prime minister, and then he lost, and then Mr. Abe came in. You'll remember that about 12 years ago. So Mr. Noda is, you see him, he looks a little bit older than he really is. I think he's about 67 years old. But having been prime minister and talking about the level of experience that's required in a kind of a new revisionist kind of atmosphere that the LDP is going through, requires the highest level of experience and competence is his delivery. He wants to separate the LDP from the Constitutional Democratic Party. He doesn't want to have any more communications or facilitation with the Japan Communist Party of splitting up votes and election districts. He says enough of that. We need to go this, and we need to hit it pretty hard. So let me see. This has really impacted. Let me get into Mr. Noda just a little bit more. So 15 years ago, he was, let me see, he defeated the LDP with 308 lower house seats, and the LDP, for the first time in post-war history, lost the government. And they ruled for about 3 years under his leadership. And then during the leadership, as you know, there was the 3/11 triple disaster, and it caused so much confusion. And the LDP came back into power. And at the same time, the Democratic Party of Japan, I think you'll all remember their performance, their live television, quizzing of bureaucrats and the things that were going on there. It was just great precipitatory politics. It changed from the Democratic People's Party of Japan to the Constitutional Democratic Party in 2017. And that party was led by Mr. Edano. And then he served one term there, and then it became Mr. Izumi. So the manifesto that the Constitutional Democratic Party runs on today was created by Mr. Edano, and the progressive platform that they support strongly forward on gender equality and multiculturalism, sexual orientation, climate, and energy. All of these things that are a little bit on the left side of conservatism, that's the platform of the Constitutional Democratic Party. And Mr. Noda wants to break that LDP majority by bringing in more people who would like to vote for the LDP, but are just, the scandal, the dirty money politics, what they have been doing for the last couple of years. And he wants to rewrite Japanese politics. And he says he wants to appeal to conservatives who are unhappy with the LDP. And also he wants to work with opposition parties, which is somewhat distasteful to the other side. There are factions within other parties. There's a very powerful faction within the Constitutional Democratic Party. That faction is led by it might not be led by Mr. Edano, but it is endorsing Mr. Edano. It has more than 20 members. Not all of them will support Mr. Edano, but they are part of that faction within the party. So he wants to be reform-oriented. Mr. Noda wants the party to be reform-oriented, less corrupt than the LDP, and appeal to conservatives. So let me see. The polling currently right now is that Mr. Noda stands at about 25% of popularity among voters who would vote in this election. Mr. Edano is slightly higher with 27%. This will change over time. And poor Mr. Izumi is coming in at 7%. So that's what we have for the Constitutional Democratic Party. In the meantime, the Ishin no Kai, the Osaka and Hyogo Prefecture building party, it is gaining in significance, but it is waning recently, and they've decided that they need to bolster themselves, so they've decided to have a twice monthly meeting, high-level meeting on how we're going to fix our party going forward. This kerfuffle with the Hyogo Prefecture governor, he's endorsed by Ishin. I don't know if you could say he's an Ishin candidate or he's an Ishin person. He was supported by the LDP and Ishin. But more importantly, there was an election for mayor just this last Sunday when we were talking, where the Ishin candidate in Mino City lost. It's the first time an incumbent from Ishin has lost an election. So it's suggestive of a trend. And if there's an election, we all expect the LDP to have a new prime minister on the 27th, or a new president on the 27th. Soon thereafter, probably within 10 days, a new prime minister, a little bit of politicking going around, and then an election before the end of the year. In the meantime, here you've got the U.S. presidential elections on November 5th. So there's a very, very small window of opportunity for the LDP to have this election, this endorsement from the people. We have a new president and a new LDP prime minister. We're going to be doing this, so please vote for us. That's a good time to have an election, or it is an appropriate time to have an election. Excuse me, Mike. So there's a lot going on there with Ishin, and who knows how that's going to come out. But it looks like there's a clear ranking that's going on. Let me see. The National Convention of Komeito will start on the 18th and run until the 27th. They will decide on a new leadership there. And Mr. Yamaguchi Natsuo, after 15 years, has decided he's going to give up that position. Jake Sullivan and Foreign Minister Yang met for 3 days this week. The Japanese delegation led by Mr. Nikai was in China at the same time. And all of this diplomatic activity going on between leaders of the lower house and the Senate from the United States coming into Tokyo. There's just so much going on that it's hard to keep on track of it. But I appreciate you joining us every week to get a tune-in about what's going on in Japanese politics. I hope this has been valuable and insightful for you. I'm open to Q&A, Maya, so that we can address those issues that maybe I avoided or didn't hit straight on, and maybe we can have some contributions from some of the Japan hands that are much smarter at this than I am.
Yes, we already have generated quite a few questions, which is wonderful. Thank you thank you to everybody who wrote their questions on LinkedIn and other platforms that we are live streaming on at the moment. I'm going to read them out to Timothy just in a few minutes. Before that, though, I would like to say thank you to our other sponsor, Houze Inc., well, the sponsor is also based in Yokohama, and they offer once again bilingual services in custom home design, construction, and renovations, plus commercial building construction. So, if you have any such projects in mind, please contact Hana Uroshisawa Howell. She is on LinkedIn, and you also find her contact details in the description of the video on YouTube. It's a pleasure to be. It has been a pleasure to work with Hannah. So do not hesitate to do that, to contact her, connect with her, and talk with her. So thank you, Timothy, for your patience. Oh, you're on the phone, maybe? Okay. Oh, Timothy is on the phone right now. I hope that everything is fine. You're also on mute, Timothy.
I would have been strangling a cat had there been one here, but it was a call that interrupted me. I apologize.
Okay, so I'm glad that my cat is with me and not with you this time because she's safe here, enjoying, the nicely cool temperature in the other room. Okay, so I'll start with the questions that have been shared on LinkedIn first. Okay,
Okay.
so we've got a question from. Just a moment, let me get there. Wow. Okay, the first one which we got was from Brian Johnston, I believe. Timothy, I lost you.
Brian,
So,
no, I'm here. I'm
okay.
just since I'm on the marina's deck and there's a lot of activity going on. I'm just a little bit distracted. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. As long as you stay on board
Oh,
and answer the questions, I think that everybody
yes.
will be rooting for you.
Thank you.
Okay. So now let me go through the first one. Please listen carefully. Okay.
I'll do
One
my
of
best.
Okay. One of the reasons the Democratic Party of Japan government collapsed was that then PM Noda Yoshihiko was expelling DPJ members over frivolous reasons,
Yep.
such as having voted against the whip. If that were the case in the US, virtually everyone from both parties would have had to be expelled. Should Yes, shouldn't Noda be held accountable for such anti-democratic misconduct before he can run yet again for the leadership position?
Who's this question from?
This is from Byron Johnston.
Byron, that's a great question and a great observation. And you're absolutely right. There are a couple of things that I would say. Number one, memories are short in Japanese politics. And number two, um, the fact, yeah, when I see Mr. Ed Noda on TV, I think to myself, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to return to that time. And I think for a lot of Japanese, they have that same sense that you've expressed. We don't want to go back there. And the reason why they lost, well, there's thousands of reasons why they lost. I don't think that's even the main one. But yes, people take great umbrage at this kind of politicking that goes on at any level. That's why the Hyogo prefecture governor is under so much trouble. Can you imagine being the newly elected governor? The former governor has left. He was governor for 15 years, and you go in, and the bureaucracy is there. You're one of the youngest governors in Japan, and you go in new, fresh, energetic. Of course, the bureaucracy there that has been there for their career is going to be, I don't want to do that. It's too much. I've got other things that I'm working on. Reviving that and implementing revisionary policies, it's got to be very difficult. And similarly with Prime Minister Noda, it's just if you're not going to pull the line, get the hell out. And I think that he was under a lot of strain, a lot of difficulty. Japan was at the same time too. So I think the Japanese voters are somewhat forgiving, somewhat lenient when it comes to that. Let's see how it goes in Hyogo with the no confidence motion promoted by the Constitutional Democratic Party, um, and how things roll out these next couple of days. But my sense is that Mr. Noda is actually looking pretty good. Um, yeah, it's a tough race. Too bad for Izumi because he's got these two big guys going against him. So I think it's going to be a fight between Edano and Noda. Yeah, I could go either way. I think probably Noda is for me the strongest candidate there. So let's wait and see. But please continue to stay tuned, and please also continue to throw in these grenades for me. I appreciate it.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Byron. We appreciate all the comments and all the assistance we can get. So, moving on to the next question, it is from Rich Young. Rich,
Yep.
thank you very much for tuning in. So, Rich writes, I don't know about Kono's politics, but great to learn. Tim has known him for a long time. Japan needs someone who can be strong vis-a-vis China and the USA, etc. Kono's English is confident and clear. He does not seem like a pushover. So, your thoughts on this, Timothy?
Thank you very much, Rich. Yeah, I've actually known Kono's dad longer than I have known Taro. In fact, I met Taro through his dad when I went to Georgetown, and he was a student there. Um, and yes, he is. He's called a maverick. He's called something of a reformist, and he definitely is. Of the three, it's Kono Taro, it's Koizumi, Shinjiro, and it is Ishiba, who are considered to be the reformers. They want to continue this march of revamping the LDP and getting the money politics out. And Kono Taro came out this week. I don't know if it was such a smart move. And he said of the members of parliament who received money in this kickback scandal, they should return that money. And that's one of my policies. And so he looks great, actually, on TV, fresh, well groomed, great looking suit, looking very presidential. So I think he came out of the block very strong. And like you said, Rich, he is determined. And I think even if he doesn't make it this time, eventually he will be prime minister. But the race is going to be a tough one. He did get an endorsement from Mr. Aso on the personal level, but Mr. Aso didn't say, this faction that I have that you belong to, maybe 50, 55, 58 people strong, I'm not endorsing you on behalf of them. It's between us, right? And the other members of our faction, let them vote with their own hearts. So he announced on Monday. On Tuesday, there was a big conclave of the Aso faction. Mr. Aso came there. He had a beautiful hat on. He had a gorgeous suit. I don't know. I think he's, if not the wealthiest, one of the wealthiest parliamentarians, and it shows. And he has a commanding respect of the faction. And he welcomed Taro's candidacy, but he also told the members of his faction, you vote with your conscience, you vote with your heart. I'm not holding anybody's feet to the fire. And I'm sure Kono was going, God, why? But, it is a different ballgame. But he's come up with 20 endorsements. He's got that. He announced that to the boss. I guess he asked for his blessing, but he made his announcement anyway. They had dinner maybe 2 weeks ago and had a discussion about that. But yeah, I think every candidate for prime minister would make a great prime minister because the way politics are and the way the bureaucracy supports it. But yes, having who the leader is does make a difference in terms of what policies they will promote, and Kono is no different. But if you'd like me to get into the particular policies of some of the candidates, let's wait a week or two when they come out with their manifesto and there's a little bit more of a shakeout so that we're not talking about 8 different people. Maybe we're talking about the top 3 or 4 contenders. But thanks, Rich.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going into the next question from Hiroko-san because it is connected
Okay.
to what just you talked about. So Hiroko-san writes, according to a latest poll, Mr. Koizumi got the first place followed by Mr. Ishiba, Ms. Takaichi, and Mr. Kono. But I learned this popularity both among the LDP and the general public has a little to do with
Yes.
actual actual results. So, what factors matter or affect the election? Are these factions, or is this who is behind, or any personal relationships?
That's a great question. And I'm afraid it's a part of the election process for LDP president that most people don't understand. So let me try and explain that very briefly to you.
Mhm,
There are 366 members of the LDP in the upper house and in the lower house. In the first round, the 366 members of the LDP have a single vote, and the members of the LDP, the guys who run companies, who are members, they pay their dues. They're not members of the LDP. I mean, they're not diet members, but also the diet members are also members here. Of those several million voters, they have 366 votes too. And those 366 votes are spread throughout the prefectures depending on how many LDP voters they have. You follow? 366, 366. That's the first round. And in the first round, if a candidate receives 50% or more, he becomes president and thereby prime minister later. When there's more than 3 or 4 candidates, it's highly unlikely that somebody's going to get 50%. So they have a runoff and they choose the 2 top vote getters. And they go into the second round 15, 20 minutes after the first round. So it all happens at the same time at LDP headquarters up on the top floor. Everybody's there. All the LDP members are there, the diet members. In the second stage, the votes are different. The diet members still hold their votes, 366, but their vote is enhanced because the number of votes for the card-carrying LDP members is 48. So if a prefecture said predominantly, I like this candidate, I like Konotaro, then that's one vote that the prefecture gets, and there are 48 prefectures. So it's 366 to 48 in the second round. So the members of the LDP have 80% more of a weight of a vote. So that's why I said with Konotaro saying, you know, if you took some money in this kickback scandal, I want you to return it. Well, if I took some money, and probably about a quarter of the LDP members, a little bit less than a quarter, received money. It's on record that they took money. If they took more than Nisenman, then they have a punishment. They have to give up their position, or they're not getting kicked out of the LDP, but they have to give up their position, and that happened to quite a few very significant individuals. But he wants them to return that. That's, you know, you're really cutting off your foot by, you know, pointing your finger at all of the people who have 80% of the vote in the second round. So the key here for Konotaro is make it through to the second round. But in the second round, now if he sticks to his guns and tells all of his colleagues, you know, the 366, a quarter of whom did receive money, that you have to return it, they don't have that money. They already spent it. That's going to be a hard nut to swallow. So I hope that explains a little bit of the dynamics, and that tells you why in the first round you need popularity from LDP voters, but you need popularity among your LDP members. And if you have limited amount of time, you're going to be spending it on the LDP members and being on TV and maybe visiting your home prefecture or something like that. But it's all happening with the LDP members themselves. So I will endorse you. I've already endorsed you, or I'm thinking of voting for you. I didn't endorse you, but I endorsed somebody else. But what's in it for me if you become elected? I'm just having a conversation with you. But those kind of conversations are happening, and there's like 8 people now that are having these conversations throughout Kasumi Gaseki. So it's very interesting.
Yes,
Dynamic.
and, yes, and I also think that some observers have actually said that Some of the candidates for the presidency of the LDP are actually not running to become the president. They are running just for gaining enough, enough support so that they can have a say in who
Sure.
becomes the president.
So
So,
the game before this, before Mr. Kishida said there are no more factions, right? So faction bosses, you're not going to select who the candidate is for prime minister, and based on the number of members in your faction, that means you get 4 ministerial posts or 3 ministerial posts, something like that. That game is all over. So now you have to barter with the candidate, and if that candidate wins, and you've bartered, I'm going to support you, and I'm going to bring 3 or 4 guys that will also support you in the second round. But damn it, I would like to have Minister of Finance.
right,
I think Minister of Finance, if I support somebody and I bring 3 or 4 members, I don't think that's enough for Minister of Finance. I think you'd have to bring a whole slew. So that means that maybe Kono Asotaro, he's going to bring a slew. He's going to be deputy prime minister, I guess. He's 84. I guess he's going to run in this next election. I don't know that, but there's a sea change that's going on in LDP politics, and we're going to feel that as a consequence of this election, and then the months to follow after that, particularly if there is a general election. And there's so much anticipation about that, and I just appreciate this opportunity to talk to people about it, because it's really coming very strongly towards us.
right. Yes. Okay. So thank you for the explanation, Timothy. I'm going back now to a commented question from Joseph Hunteman. Sorry, Joe. Thank you very much for watching. So it's been a while since we talked. It's very nice to see you here. So
Joe's from Georgia. Hi, Joe.
yes, yes. Okay. They say history moves on 100-year cycles. Anyone else getting vibes of the interwar years of the 20th century with all of this geopolitical instability? So this is a question, actually.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a question. I think it's an observation.
Mm,
With so much going on, this reconnaissance by the Chinese, it's so, I don't want to say it's out of character, but this is the first time for them to do that, for them to invade and violate Japanese airspace. There have been times, and the explanation was, well, it was just a pilot's error. It's not a pilot's error. This is calculated. And this escalation that's going on, it's not being missed. It's not being ignored by the United States and by Japan. China, the foreign minister there, pointed his finger at Jake Sullivan. Jake Sullivan is a pretty significant individual, and said, Taiwan is ours. It will be a part of China. Stay the hell away. And you arming Taiwan and encourage them to be like independent. And you're here asking me, what about independence? Can we talk about independence for Taiwan and kind of put this thing to bed? He said that's a ridiculous comment, and it will never be acceptable. Taiwan is a part of China. By force, if necessary, it will be reunited with the motherland. So it does feel an awful lot like that, Joe, and I appreciate the observation. If you're watching this program, you understand and you know that the escalation of military spending and the amount of military armaments in the Japan military industrial complex growing, the amount of the defense budget, that sort of thing, it really is unmistakable. But you have to watch it, and you have to see how that interacts with other parts of the diplomacy and geopolitics and that sort of thing. Not everybody's focused on it, but it's of keen interest to me, and I think to a lot of people who are in the audience. So.
yes, extrapolating on this, there are a couple of other questions, this time on YouTube. So from Surya. Surya, thank you very much for being with us again this morning. So Surya writes, China breached Japanese airspace earlier this week. Yesterday, China's Navy's survey ship also entered Japan's territorial waters. What is China's purpose in doing this? And do you think this is only a one-time thing, or is it going to be a normal occurrence in the future, just like in Taiwan?
Okay, so who is this from?
Surya,
Studia. This is, I hadn't heard of the naval incursion, but following so quickly. And there were two huge delegations. There was a delegation from Japan in Beijing. There was a delegation from the United States led by Jake Sullivan in a lakeside resort. When this incursion happened with the reconnaissance airplane. So now I'm beginning to think, no, it's not a mistake. It is an escalation of maybe a pattern of practice that we can anticipate going forward. I don't know, but if there's going to be more incursions, then the tensions are just going to ratchet up in kind. So it's a very delicate time. And like Joe was saying, don't you have this sense of something building? And I don't want to feel that, but yes, I see the indicators of that, and it makes me worried.
indeed, yes. And there is a question here on YouTube again from Hiroaki. Who is the strongest prime minister who can confront Mr. Putin? And I'm sorry to say this, Hiroaki, but I don't think that confrontation is, the right strategy here, especially when it comes to Japan and, some other smaller states in Europe. So, yeah, I think that we have long, long ago forgotten, the power and the importance of diplomacy. And unfortunately, as Timothy just mentioned, there is this gradual move and that gradual escalation, because everybody is trying to, to show how much stronger they are than the
Yep.
others at the other side, instead of just talking and trying to find a way forward without escalation. So I'm sorry, I'm not very happy to read that comment from Hiroaki today. So
Well, okay, but at the same time, Maya, diplomacy requires, two parties to play the game.
yes,
And as we can see from the reconnaissance incursion, this isn't part of the rules. This isn't part of how we agree to things. Jake Sullivan and Wang were talking about, let's have military to military communications. Let's at least open that channel. And the response he got was, that's a good idea. Let's think about that. He
mhm,
also said, let's have a head of state meeting between Mr. Biden and the Chinese premier before Mr. Biden gives up the office. But that's in 3 months that's going to happen. That
yeah.
could happen. It could probably supplement Kamala Harris's shine in maybe foreign policy circles. I don't know. But what's going on with Russia and Japan is distinctly different from what's going on with China and
Right.
Japan. Yes, there's a lot of stuff going on in the northern islands that is of concern, but you certainly don't want to have to deal with both China and Russia and North Korea at the same time, and you've got Iran making noises at the same time. So, echoing back to Joe's comment, the configuration of forces kind of moving in that direction is just, it's so worrying.
It is indeed. Okay, and now I have a question from Yuka. And so Yuka writes, thank you in advance for sharing your insights on the following, but to the extent you feel comfortable. So the comment and the question are, former New Jersey government Chris Christie will teach a course on how to run a political campaign at Yale. Will a course like this be beneficial to Japanese college students? Who will make the best teacher on this topic, in your opinion? Thank you for answering in advance.
What's the title of the class once again?
It is how to run a political campaign.
Um, yeah, that's a difficult one. I think running a political campaign, who's really good at it is Rahm Emanuel. So Rahm
Mm,
Emanuel is the current ambassador from the United States in Japan, and I think he ran Obama's campaign, and as a consequence of that victory, received as a gift or as a reward the ambassadorship to Japan. That's a big deal. So congratulations to him. Chris Christie is of the same caliber, but running a campaign in the United States and running a campaign anywhere else in the world is going to be distinctly different. And Japan has its own idiosyncrasies and its own way of doing it. I think knowing how other people do it, how you appeal to people, um, some of those techniques, some of those programs are probably um, easily applied, but the devil is in the details. How do you get it so that people, rather than staying at home, actually get up and go to the polling booth? So there are a lot of people who might support you, but the kid's crying and I forgot to buy milk, and there are hundreds of reasons not to go to the polling booth. And the vast majority of people don't go to the polling booth, even though they might be somewhat politically motivated. So running a campaign, first it's the policy, it's the personality, it's the appearance, the looks, but there's so much more that's going on that's just anchored in cultural norms, and Japan's are her own. And the election campaign I haven't run, but I have been involved in many, many Japanese election campaigns. And for most Japanese, it's considered to be like a matsuri, how getting together, and you can't drink on behalf of the candidate, but there's a lot of drinking that goes on. There's a lot of parties and that sort of thing. But getting people energized and engaged about what this candidate, and usually it's you vote for the candidate, whatever his policies are, because you know him, or your dad knew him, or he kissed your baby, or something like that. So it's very different. It's distinctly different from how the United States is, and you can see that in how the Japanese feel even about religion, or about forming groups or cohesion, that sort of thing. So I've gone on too long about it, but yeah, that would be a great course to attend. I don't know how much it would impact. It would impact your understanding of how to potentially run a campaign in Japan, or how that might be better done. But they've been doing it a long time here, and they've got their own way of doing it, as usual.
Right. Yes. Okay. Thank you for that, Timothy. And we're moving back to LinkedIn. Oh, yes. So we've got Thomas Logan. Tom, thank you for
Whoa.
tuning in. Yes. So a question from Tom. With the silly nonsense, humor, comedy, and hijinks we saw in Metro Tokyo government elections, with fringe candidates also rear its head in the next parliamentary elections?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it works, right? It did work a little bit, so I think
Yeah.
you'll see that. You saw what Mr. Ishimaru did. He pushed out the Constitutional and Democratic Party to come in second place behind the current governor, Koike, with his campaign. It wasn't hijinks, it wasn't a lot of humor, but it was using the internet in new and innovative ways. There were a lot of fringe candidates that were wearing funny hats or performing on national television because they get national TV time. Um, but whatever gets the votes. But people are fickle, and people are quick to judgment. If you do something the wrong way, and I think that's why Mr. Koizumi is. I would have liked to have seen him be a little bit bolder in his decision to throw his hat in, and that's why I like Kobayashi Takayuki, because he was bold, he was committed, he's young, he's vigorous, he comes from a bureaucratic background. He was educated in the United States with a master's degree there, so he's a very attractive candidate for prime minister. And with Mr. Koizumi, I think there's a lot of flash, there's a lot of movie star quality there, but very, very little on the policy side or on the experience side. So I think probably his better bet is to weigh in behind Mr. Kono or Mr. Ishiba, and as a consequence of that, foreign minister or finance minister, he will bring other people to the party, and I think that's the better play for him. But I don't know if I strayed too far off of the question, but remind me what the question was if I did, Maya.
No, I think you answered that. Yes, and basically it runs back to another observation and another comment you made in the beginning. Answering another question actually. about influence, political influence, and how people actually vie for getting ministries and more power within the cabinet.
Yeah,
Yes. Okay.
the time to attract the public's eye is not during the campaign. They either know you or they don't know you. They're not going to get to know you over the campaign. They might understand a little bit better the distinction between you and somebody else, but the flash and flare and comedy and hijinks in national politics, that means Thomas is not talking about the presidential election. He's talking about the general election that's going to happen
Yes.
after that.
Yeah.
And yes, I think there's going to be a lot of open seats. A lot of LDP members are not going to be succeeded. And so there'll be more competition for those open seats. So yeah, I do suspect that you'll see a little bit of that.
Right. Yes. And also, another point about the general election, I believe, from Rich Young, is that there is a fascinating political science study that shows that I don't vote has won every election in the US since 40. To what you said a little bit earlier, and Rich, I think it's the case not only in the US. It's I can say that it has been the case in Bulgaria too.
Yeah.
So every single election I don't vote, it has won the election. For certain people, of course. So yeah, there is science, and obviously, there is a lot of truth behind it. So
And
yeah.
in addition to that, let me just add another piece of flavor to that. In addition to that, it's the undecided voters who actually consist of the largest number of voters. So you have the committed people, they're committed to the Communist Party or the Socialist Party or the Liberal Democratic Party. They're a small minority, but the biggest one is, I'm not decided, I don't pay membership dues for any one of those parties, but I'm loose and, whoever I like, I'm going to vote for. That's the largest number. And so as a consequence, when it's raining or when the weather's inclement during election day, the parties do much better, and particularly the LDP being the largest party. Then, when voter turnout turns out to be maybe 28 or 30%, yes, the sway of the political parties is far greater. But when it's nice and sunny and people are engaged and want to vote because Koizumi's voting or Koizumi is running, doesn't mean that they're going to go to the vote. And when they pull the lever, when they write down the name here in Japan, when they write the name down, it doesn't necessarily mean Koizumi, but at least it gets them engaged and involved, and they're going there and talking to all their neighbors. So that's part of the gig too.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, and just a quick look at Clubhouse now. We've got Cam there who said it's good to see Japan's Ministry of Defense is increasing its cyber and AI budgets per reports.
Yes.
So it's what he reads. And then Yuka, towards your question about Chris Christie and whether, the Japanese politics might benefit from any, courses in how to run a political campaign, Cam there shared a link, to a Columbia University. I believe it is an article, and he also says it would be fascinating to apply his method. Well, that's about who's that? Professor Green at Columbia University. So, and Cam writes, it would be fascinating to apply Professor Green's methodology to Japan's government efforts here. So I haven't read that article, and probably we need some time to actually have a look at it before we comment.
Thanks
But
very
yes,
much.
yes,
Really
thank you
appreciate you being
for
in the
this.
audience.
Yeah. Okay, and with this, it seems that we have gone through all the questions. Timothy, I know that you are keen to go back to work, even though it is Sunday. And when I say go back to work, I don't mean go back to work in the office, because yeah, that's not the time when you get inquiries, I believe, for future projects. But to everybody watching us, please be informed that Timothy's company, Langley Esquire, is a government relations and public affairs company. So if you ever are thinking about entering the Japanese market, you have a person to contact, and he is right here on screen. with you. That's Timothy Langley and his company Langley Esquire. So
Thank
Timothy,
you, Maya.
before we close the live stream today, I once again want to say thank you very much to our sponsors. They are Kanchu.com and Houze Inc. So James Howell at Kanchu.com and Hanako Urushizawa Howell at Houze Inc. Please do not hesitate to contact them. You have no problem speaking with them either in Japanese or in English, and they are there to help you actually run your projects in the most smooth way. So, and thank you very much to both. Timothy, a big thank you to you again for reporting on this kind of murky Sunday morning. We're waiting for the typhoon to come again, hit
But
again.
the great thing, even though it's the 186th episode, and
Mhm.
we are in the middle of a typhoon, look at this sky. This is incredible, right?
Yes,
Isn't this great?
it is great. So we have also gotten comments about you again. Stay safe, okay?
Oh yes, I will stay safe, but that's why I'm here because yeah, safety first.
Oh,
And
okay.
there's a lot to do here too. So
Yes,
thank you very
indeed.
much for your concern, and thanks for everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Maya.
Thank you. Okay, that's all for today. To everybody who watched us and who didn't and will watch us later in the day or during the week, please stay safe. Stay indoors, stay dry, and do not actually do things that are dangerous within this when the typhoon is around.
Like me.
Like you, yes, like you. Exactly. That's just okay. Anyway, that's all for today. See you next Sunday, and before that on Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock when we'll be talking with James.